Good morning to everyone there.
Good
Waiting
morning.
to the start of the meeting, huh?
Yeah. Okay.
George, I think you're still muted yourself. Yeah,
Well,
now you're on.
yeah, well, I'm not talking till later, so I can wait. You're
I
safe
s-
today.
I saw your lips moving, but didn't hear anything. That's why I said it.
This happens. Good. Yeah, we're gonna have quite a crowd, so
That's good.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Rob McNeil. I'm the Director of Public Works here for the town of Nantucket. I really welcome all of you today. I appreciate everyone's interest in this RFEI, request for expressions of interest. I wanted to introduce the team. We have with us today our solid waste recycling coordinator, Ms. Graham Durovich, is going to be monitoring the chat. If anybody has comments or questions throughout today's briefing, if you could input anything like that into the chat, try to help keep things moving here. Depending on people's behavior, we may have a open Q&A at the end of this, but for right now, we're just going to try to contain everything into the chat. And let's see, from here, we have George Aronson from CRMC, our consultant. And also joining us is Rebecca Woodley Oliver, Assistant Procurement Officer from the Finance Office. So again, thank you all. We have lots of different representatives here interested, and I'm going to share my screen and walk you through a few different things here.
I don't see myself there.
Bear with me a moment.
I'm not showing up on there.
Okay.
screen? No.
All right, are people seeing this? Graham,
Yep,
you'll have to let me know if you can see
We
this.
can see it.
Okay. Should be up on the landfill entrance and recycling facility page. Can you see that?
Yep.
All right. So what I'd like to do is basically give people an understanding of what you're seeing on Google Earth. If you haven't been to our facility, we have a quick presentation of including a drone video as well. So I'll refer back to, or if you could refer back to our numbered site plan that has numbers 1 through 16 on the landfill site, just to give you a sense of what we are about out here as far as the site layout goes. So I'm going to switch over to a quick drone video. And if Graham, give me the thumbs up if you see that come through.
Rob, you're not currently sharing your screen.
Okay, thank you. So this is starting looking southwest in the Nantucket section of town where the DPW and landfill facility is located. You'll see a sweep of Long Pond and Nantucket Road. And what you see first here is the DPW campus right at the bottom middle of the slide. The Nantucket Sound is to the top of the page. And as we come across the site, you'll start to see the landfill facility and ultimately over to the east, the solid waste handling facility. So I'll stop here and just show you Nantucket Road has 3 separate entrances into this town-owned facility. The easternmost location is the entrance into the landfill facility. The center location is a gated drop-off for shellfish or discarded shells. And the third entrance to the west is the entrance into the DPW facility. So I'll let this play through a little bit. You can see the various landfill components in the center, and that varies from lined cells that are active and the original remnants of the unlined cell to the east. I will stop it there for a sec and just simply scroll back and point out to the far southeast, we have the C&D transfer station, followed by a number of windrows of various compost related products that are in various stages of maturation. We have the leaf and yard waste drop-off area. Then the white facility here is the co-composter facility, which includes the rotating drum, as well as the biofilter that handles the odors from odor control from the facility. And then up front, we have the lower section here, the scale house and scale, and then the materials recovery facility, the MRF, with the residential drop-off area. To the rear, we have what's called the take it or leave it, or the swap shop. And then on the way out of the facility, we have some materials bins for what's free to the public, the various compost products that are available that folks can pull off and take back with them. So let that play through a little bit just to give you a kind of an overall sense. Scale wise, you can see a couple vehicles on the ground, excavators in the foreground. Just as reference, you see a little bit of a traffic. This was taken during the winter a couple years ago. So there's certainly been some activity out there since. You can see a little bit of the initial filling of our most recently activated lined cell, cell 3A, happening up in that area. All right. Some of the wetlands adjacent to Long Pond, and I'll pause it there. And just go back to the initial screen. Are you seeing the landfill site again? Yes, okay. So again, coming into the facility, the MRF and the associated parking lot, the take it or leave it in site 4, the composter facility with the biofilter, leaf and yard waste drop off, the brush pile, wood waste pile, and mixed excavation waste, and then C&D, a number of other materials stored along the easternmost property line, scrap metal, tires, and the white goods, refrigerators, freezers, and AC units.
Rob, can you go into presentation mode, please? George, is Rob frozen for you as well?
Yeah. Sometimes he needs to get out of presentation mode, so I don't know if that. Yeah, Rob just froze. So everybody stand by. We'll figure this out. Okay. And maybe he just undo his screen. Did we lose Rob?
I believe so. I think he's signing back in.
Okay, so forgive us for this interruption. Can we, will we be uploading the drone footage to the website? Is that something?
We might be able to. We can look into that. It's a fairly large file, but we plan to upload this recording. So certainly you'll have access to that and what was just shown.
Yeah, maybe that would be enough, is to have the, if we have the whole recording, then people can see the drone footage that way. Rebecca, is that something we can do, you think?
Yes, most likely. We also could, if there's a way that it's not already on our website, we may be able to post it elsewhere, and I can send a link to everyone that's registered. But we can work on that for sure.
Okay, so, and that's true also. So we're going to have the rest of the PowerPoint, and then I'll have a brief PowerPoint, but we'll have those on the uploaded as well. So that
Yes, those I can, I should be able to upload to the original posting. No problem.
Again, we're enjoying a brief intermission. This is brought to you by 2021 and Zoom technology. And we, our apologies for taking more of your time than we need to, but sometimes these things are out of our control. And, this would be much easier if you could all come to the site and walk around, but since that's not happening, we're doing the next best thing we can. And again, thanks for your patience. And I hope Rob will be on shortly. I mean, I have his PowerPoint. We could share his screen while we're waiting if he has a trouble.
He's joining us momentarily.
Okay, so let's give Rob another chance to get back on again. You're just joining us. And
It seems he's having internet issues at the DPW. So if you could go ahead, George, perhaps, and run your slides right now,
Yeah, okay.
or Rob's, whatever you think is best.
Okay, so give me one moment and I will do that. And again, apologies for.
All right, sorry about that.
Okay.
Island internet issues. Unfortunately, a common occurrence. All right. So I will try to recover this and get back on track with the suggestion of resuming the slideshow. All right. Graham, are you able to see the slide recyclable waste?
I think you need to share your screen. There you go.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Back in
All right. Just walking through some of the processes here with some photographs from the site itself under recyclable waste. We have our drop-off area where folks come in and drop off through various chutes down to the MRF floor. That is various materials. There's a hand sorting conveyor system that folks are working through right now. As noted here, currently our material is heading to Miller Recycling in Mansfield, once baled. Our glass is crushed and typically used around site. We have a compostable waste process that runs through the co-composter facility. Again, you can see the rotating drum in the center of the slide. The tipping building accepts waste from the sludge cake from the wastewater treatment plants on the island, combined with our compostable waste stream, both from residents at the drop-off area, as well as deliveries by private haulers. Again, here's our drum. And materials take about average of 2 to 3 days to travel from one end to the other, reaching about 140 to 160 degrees. This is a couple of shots from inside the drum while it was down for maintenance. The steel ribs that line the edges are periodically, typically annually, repaired or replaced. Material coming out of the drum travels up this conveyor system and goes through a primary screening. And the materials from that that get screened off are baled and become the only materials that are typically landfilled. So the material that passes through the screen becomes the initial compost materials that get matured on the floor initially within the building, and then are further screened and set outside, combined with leaf and yard waste to become a finished compost. And again, the materials that get screened off, the overs, ultimately get baled, and that's what gets landfilled here. So these are materials that don't belong there to begin with. They're typically materials that are either recyclables that were inadvertently included in people's compostable waste, or other materials like film plastics and that sort of thing. Is a shot of the baled residuals. from that process, getting ready to get landfilled. And then the beginnings of the compost. So the wet humus material is stockpiled and begins curing, draining, and gets air introduced below it through the floor, and ultimately windrowed. It takes about 21 days to process from one end of the facility to the other before it goes behind the door at the top of the slide into the final screening process and then heads outside. So final screening is essentially removing some smaller materials and stones and that sort of thing, including additional removal of plastic and glass. Heads outside for curing, and you can see some of the stockpiled brush and other materials out there already. Begins its life outside. Odor control in the last part of the facility is this large biofilter that utilizes green wood waste to remove odors. And then various materials. Currently, the composter compost is not available to the public.
Uh-oh, George, we might need you to take over.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I may have to wait till Rob's screen is no longer shared. So let me do that. Yeah, he's frozen. Okay, and let me find Rob's presentation if I can. And I think we were pretty much done with that as well. So I think if we want, while we're waiting, I can go through the RFEI. And then when Rob gets back on, you can continue talking.
Sounds good, George.
Okay, let's see. Let me do just one more thing. Okay, wait a sec. This is. Yeah, there's the bio. Okay. Let me see if I can do this. And okay, can you see the screen at this, the landfill shot?
Yes, George.
Okay, so this is Rob's presentation. So let's see how far we got. There's the biofilter. It's a large building. In fact, the biofilter building itself is almost as big as the aeration building, and you can see the wood trips. So air is taken, ventilation air is taken from the various rooms in the composter building, the aeration area, the tipping area, and fed through the media here to make sure there are no odor complaints. I will say this, the facility has a very good record in avoiding odor complaints off site. And this biofilter is one of the reasons why that's been the case. Okay, we talked about compost. Just a few words about the landfill. Can you see the landfill? Okay, the landfill, this is, I believe, cell 3A, which was recently permitted. And there were 10 years, but it's only permitted at this point to take residuals from the composter. It is not permitted to be used for disposal of MSW. A lot of people have asked that question, but Nantucket has very little space. This space was created by mining out the landfill over a 10-year period, removing the material that had been deposited there previously to make the space to build the cell 3A. And it's being filled, as you can see, with the bales of material that are residual materials from the composter process. There is information on the website of what this is. It's predominantly the largest component has been plastic film in the past, but there's more information on that on the website. So if you want to go back and get that document, you can see, but this is what it looks like. Bales placed in one next to each other. Not a lot of time. And it's when we go into the RFEI, one of the questions is, if we're going to continue with the composter, is there something else to be done with the baled material? Some way to reuse it or convert it to a product? Because landfill space on Nantucket is very, very precious, and everything that can be done to reduce its use is valuable. It's true everywhere, especially on Nantucket, given the value of land and land limitations. So I think this is actually, there's also information on waste sorting, and Graham, maybe you should take through this. But Nantucket has done a few waste sort studies. There is data on the website on the results of this. And Graham, do you want to go through this?
Sure, thanks, George. So biannually since 2018, in the fall, we have been doing waste sorts of 200 bags of what goes into the composter. At the time, it was just MSW, and we've since changed that to being called compostable waste to communicate to the community what we would like to be seeing going into the composter to reduce contamination. So we actually had one yesterday, our winter one. And if you go to the next slide, George, please. And the next one after that.
Food scraps.
And the next one, we'll skip that for now.
Okay.
This is, I think, from one of the earlier waste sorts. And we find it roughly that about 2/3 of the material is compostable: food, scraps, and paper, what we want to see going into the composter, obviously. And the remaining fraction is the contamination. We have seen our community get better at sorting slowly, but behavior change takes time, as I'm sure you all know. But this is certainly something that we are focusing on at the community level to segregate our wastes better. One of the slides that George had George skip over quickly is information about our single-use plastics ban that went into effect in June of this past year. We already have a biodegradable packaging bylaw, and this took it a step further with some of the items listed below on the screen. And this certainly affects the waste that we receive at the facility. So it's a slightly different mixture of waste than you might see on the mainland. We don't see much styrofoam, for instance. You can move along, George. Thanks.
And I think that's
And
it.
so just a reminder that the RFEI responses are due back at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on February the 11th. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to do mine now. Okay, and again, I'm George Aronson, and let me see if I can make this into full screen mode. Okay, my name is George Aronson with Commonwealth Resource Management Corporation. Been working with the town of Nantucket for a number of years. Okay, we saw this slide. This is also in the RFEI for reference of the facilities. Those who came in late, there is drone footage from the earlier part of the program, and then some pictures of the various facilities just to get a sense of what the site is. Big, quick overview. Should say solid waste to be managed. The composter takes 11,000 tons of MSW. We would like that to be the organic fraction of MSW. It's not entirely that yet. Right now, it's MSW, whatever comes in. 1,700 tons per year of sewage cake and about 11 tons per year of local manures from stables, etc. The MRF takes about 2,000 tons per year of paper containers and glass. And the other materials coming in the site, 2,100 tons of what on Nantucket is called nernix. Not recycled, not compostable. So this is stuff that if it goes through the composter will end up in the residuals. And one of the challenges, and this has been an ongoing program, is to get it out up front so it doesn't take up landfill space. Because once it goes through that drum and goes through the trommel, it doesn't go through the screen. It ends up as a residual, it goes to the landfill. Anything we can do to keep that material out of the landfill is a plus. And one of the questions is, okay, if we get it out of the landfill, is there something beneficial we can do for it? And so that's a question for of general interest to those who might respond. A lot of C&D waste coming, 10,000 tons per year or more of leaf and yard waste. In fact, on Nantucket, there's just about as much yard waste as there is regular waste, which is kind of impressive. And then even more what we call mixed excavation waste, which is if you dig something out of, and to build a house and you don't have anywhere to put it back, well, it comes to the landfill site and the town has to figure out what to do with it. To challenge it. Sometimes you can use it to raise grades or as grading and shaping material, but it's another waste stream that makes life complicated, as are brush, tires, and all those hard to manage items. So why are we doing this? Why are we going through all this trouble to do an RFEI? And the bottom line is the town has been working through the waste services agreement for all these services for over 20 years now. But November 30th, 2024, that agreement expires, and December 1st, a new world opens, and we don't know what that world is going to look like. And you might ask, aren't you just going to extend the agreement? Well, our town council informs us that we have to go through a procurement process. There has to be a competitive procurement. We have to get it approved by town meeting. All those things that towns have to do that makes life transparent, open, and sometimes complicated. And there's no consensus on exactly what to procure. So this is a once in a generation window to reconsider the full system, and that's why we're here. This is part of that long process. Now I realize that in the solid waste world, in terms of new facility development, December 1st, 2025 is literally right around the corner. We're probably starting a little late, and maybe there's some flexibility to deal with transition time if we have to, but we're started now. We're looking forward to that time frame, and that's why we're here. What's being discussed? Services of interest. Well, part one, it's not in the PowerPoint. The town right now does not own the composter. The town owns the MRF. The town does not own the composter. The waste services agreement includes within it an option for the town to purchase the composter. So we better start thinking now, is the town going to exercise that option or not? If the town exercises the option, they'll need somebody to run it, or they can run it with the DPW. Lots of questions here. Well, is there anybody out there interested in being a contract operator for the composter? What terms, what are their thoughts? Can they bring in some different perspectives, things that we don't know about? Lots of experience, synergies with off-island operations. Wide open to requests, to responses at this point. But I think that's the context for the first part, and that's why we've shown you so many pictures of the composter. I mean, right now, what's the town's inclination? Well, it's a composter. Use it to compost organics. If something's not organic, don't try to compost it. I mean, sounds very obvious, but it's very difficult to do, as everyone knows, because this facility was set up as a mixed waste composter, and to get the contaminants and to change separation protocols is very challenging, very difficult, not something that's easily done. So the second issue is, of course, right now we're co-composting MSW and sewage sludge. I'm just going to say the word PFAs. Lots of uncertainties coming. It may be that the sewage sludge may have to be handled in a different way in the future, and we want to be prepared for that, and we want to start thinking about that now. And so we're open to innovative and viable proposals. The second service of interest is, if you don't compost, you might do something else. What might that something else be? And I'll talk more about that in a minute. And the third, there's always been a segment of the island that has said, Nantucket's small, there are challenges working here. Maybe we're better off just transferring everything to the mainland and shutting down the composter. There's not a lot of landfill space for residuals. Maybe that's something we ought to look into. So we're asking the question. Challenges. When I say the island environment and economics, you've already seen it. The internet service has an island flavor to it, and it's a challenge. Living costs on Nantucket are high, which means if you got a facility that has a labor force, got to take that into account. It's hard to get parts out to Nantucket if something's broken. You got to have spare parts on site. You have to know how to repair things, or you have to wait for somebody to come from the mainland. All sorts of issues related to dealing with operations of facilities in Nantucket that are just a little bit more challenging, just a little different from doing things on the mainland. You're on an island 30 miles away. You got to take a boat or a plane to get there. Sometimes there's a storm when you're down, and you have to be ready for that, especially for an essential service like solid waste management, where you cannot allow an odor problem to continue, etc. Seasonality, 60,000 people in the summer, 10,000 people in the winter. Most facility economics count on a regular high load factor operation year round. Nantucket has a very seasonal demand for solid waste management. It's one of the reasons, or one of the advantages of the type of composter, where you can turn it down and run it at a small fraction of its capacity in the winter, and then turn it up when you need it in the summer. Any alternative is going to have to address the seasonality issue and the scale issue. Do you build it to handle the peak, or do you build it to handle the valley? And how economic will it be given the ranges in demand and service? PFAS, I'm not going to talk a lot about PFAS and regulatory uncertainty, because they speak to themselves, to people in the business. There's a lot of concern about PFAS on Nantucket, as there are in many places. There are new measurement protocols going forward. This is all very uncertain. There's a study ongoing on exposure throughout the island that should be coming out sometime in January, is my understanding. Something we have to look at, because it may change the viability of certain options. And in fact, if there's a technology, for example, that handles sewage sludge and destroys the PFAS, that's something that's going to be very interesting. Now, I do know that the sewer department is doing its own pilots and investigations, and this is a bit of a piggyback. While we're out there asking for information, if somebody can come in and introduce the technology that can handle the PFAS, that can handle sewage sludge, that's certainly part of that, and we can work through that. We can work with the sewer department people and get that into the conversation on the island. So this is a chance to get into that discussion as well. And finally, timing, so important always. We're looking at this deadline in 2025, and that's around the corner on the solid waste timescale. So just some questions. The RFEI asked some questions we've asked you to respond to. Don't limit your responses to that. We'll look at what you send us, but we thought it would be helpful to give someone idea of what the town's interest in some of the burning questions are. Scope of services. Well, there's the composter, but there's as much leaf and yard waste as there is material coming into the composter itself. So something that handles a range of materials, or is clever or innovative about moving among materials, that's interesting. Where does the scope stop? You have all those materials now being collected on the road to the transfer station, or that might be dropped off on the way. Some real questions about, right now the town's contractors taking everything. It's not necessarily the case that will continue after 2025, and we want to think about what services might contractors be willing to do, and what might provide advantages or synergies, and what might be a problem. And again, there are other questions about contract terms. How do you want to be compensated? Is this something where everything's going to be a pass-through, or are there fixed fees and guarantees? What is this going to look like? And we're open to questions about, are there things that we can do on the collection side so that less coming in would end up in the landfill and more would go to some beneficial use? Finally, credibility. Tell us who you are, what your experience is, where you've made this work, how much you've developed it elsewhere. New technology, a similar set of questions. If you're doing something new, you have to tell us how it's going to integrate into the rest of the system. because every part is interactive. And if there's a technology that has certain components that are unprocessable or unacceptable, then we're going to have to handle them somewhere else. Tell us what that is. Feedstocks, products, we talked a little about that. Products, it's an island. There are a lot of boats that use marine diesel. There's no natural gas system on the island, but there's a lot of use of propane and a lot of use of diesel as well. If there was a way to make a liquid fuel product out of organics that was economic, there's a local market for that. An interesting thing that a lot of people have talked about. At one point, there were discussions with the Steamship Authority about using a drop-in marine diesel product. We can recommence those discussions if there's some interest in that. If it's a new technology, we want to know how new. Is it something that's still bench scale and you looking for a place to do a pilot? Is it commercialized at scale? Nantucket scale isn't that big, so maybe it's a scale up that would be less than a commercial facility elsewhere. Tell us what your thinking is. And again, business arrangements, cost, schedule, and what I've called credibility. Who are you? What's your experience? Why should we take your word for what you say you can do? Transfer to the mainland. Important point here, just as the internet was interrupted earlier in this presentation, sometimes the ferry isn't running because of storms. And once in a while, there are trucks on the dock when the ferry doesn't come in full of waste, and we have odor issues in the downtown tourist area. That's unacceptable. We can't do that. We can't have waste transferred to the mainland with leakage or nuisances. So if you're going to propose or look at transfer to the mainland, tell us how to do it. Tell us how we're going to have a high performance system, no nuisances. It's going to be economic. If there's a way to do this, other than using the Steamship Authority ferry, again, it's one of those side issues that keeps coming up. You can't put MSW on an open deck barge, but if there's something else that you can do, this is a good time to introduce that thought. And haul to receiving facility on the mainland. We know there are capacity shortages in southeastern Massachusetts. We know that there are proposals to ship materials out of region, and some of those entities doing that work are putting together some fairly sophisticated systems for getting the material, loading it, and then shipping it off. If that's something that could work in Nantucket, and maybe there's something you can containerize on the island and send it all the way through, let us know about it. Or if you're a receiving facility on the mainland, let us know about that as well. And then cost, term, schedule, who are you, all important. The response, not a lot of requirements here. A cover sheet, a cover letter, the answers to the questions, who are you? It's electronic, so you don't have to print a bunch of things to send us. You could email it or upload it, I should say. We ask that you keep the PDF files small enough so that we can email them around among the reviewing team, the people in town. And I got that right, Rebecca, under 40 megs. And the responses are public information. So if there's confidential information that's important, leave it out of the public response. There may be ways to keep it confidential on the side, but we'll have to make a special arrangement for that once we know that you're at the next level. So I assume that everybody who's responding can tell us enough to make us interested. If there's confidential material we have to look at in the second round, we will do that when we get there. Process, questions by email. We've already done that once. There were already some questions about budgets and tip fees and a few other things. And a quick response, there is a posted response on the website about that. Tip fees on Nantucket are a little different than they are elsewhere. Right now, MSW, there's no tip fee charged to haulers for MSW. It's handled through the general fund and through the enterprise fund. There are assessments on hotels and restaurants. For some of the specialty items, there are either per item or per weight charges. And one of the one of the conflicts has always been, if you charge too much for a specialty item, somebody dumps it on the moors, and we don't want any dumping on the beach. So there's always, do you charge for what it costs, or do you just accept it free and let the town, collect the revenue through other ways? Lots of discussion on that topic. If there's a specific system that you need to support your financing of whatever you want to do, let us know and we'll consider it. But this has been an interesting back and forth over the years of how to charge for solid waste in Nantucket. Again, this is not a procurement document per se. It's a pre-procurement document. The responses will come in, they'll get analyzed, discussed, there might be follow-up, and then the town will go through a decision process. And when it comes to actually making those decisions on what and which contract gets chosen, there will be a follow-on RFP or other procurement. We're all looking at Monday, December 1st, 2025, when the facility opens, because right now, no contract is in place for what happens on that day, at that time, for the solid waste on Nantucket. It's a real problem. It needs a real solution. We don't have preconceived notions. Maybe some of us have some thoughts, but we're opening up the process, and this is the time to present. This is the window of opportunity for the next generation of solid waste on Nantucket. So there it is. Did we ever get Rob back?
I'm back. Thank you, George.
Okay, so
I do appreciate it. And once again, I appreciate everyone's attendance today. Unfortunately, you got to experience some of the challenges that we experience out here and continue to work on to improve. With that, I just wanted to touch base. Graham, do we have any activity in the chat?
Yes, we have numerous questions, so we'll get started on that. And if anyone else has any questions or any others come up, feel free to add them to the chat as well. Thank you. We had a question about where recycling is sent in Mansfield and what is the annual payment to the receiver. And I can start. Miller Recycling receives our recyclables in Mansfield. George, do you have an idea off the top of your head?
Okay. So first of all, just a disclaimer up front. We'll answer the questions that we know up front, but we will give written answers because some of the things might require some checking. Under the current waste services agreement, the way recycling is set up is the presumption is that there are revenue and transportation costs. So the revenue from the material that goes in that's handled by through the agreement with Waste Options, transportation costs are netted out of it, and the net revenue is split 50-50. And so that's the way that's been done. Now, there have been times when the material, when there was no revenue from the material, then that payments had to be made to move the material. That has been something that's happened in the past, and the town has come up with other arrangements. Basically, if it's a cost, the town has picked up that cost in the past. Nobody's happy about it, but I don't think anybody was happy about the market when it did what it did. Things seem to be a little bit better now. But again, that's been the history. And again, starting in 2025 with new arrangements, there's no reason why the new arrangement necessarily has to be the same as the existing arrangement. But that's how it's worked. There's been revenue, transportation cost has been netted out of that. And then if there's a netted split, if there's a cost, the town has picked it up.
Thanks, George. Next question, is the town open to combusting all the waste?
There have been inquiries about combustion. And first of all, some things don't burn, so they're never going to combust all of the waste. The issue about combustion in Nantucket is scale. Can you do something that's small enough that fits in the space we have and the island we have? If you're generating residue, is it something that our landfill can handle and can handle over the time that it needs to for the life of the facility and its financing, et cetera? So, don't look for a big mass burn like CMAS or something like that. That's too big for Nantucket. But if there's a modular combustion or gasification technology that's the right size, that's the right shape, that fits in the footprint where the economics work, then that's something that we'd like to learn about. I think there's been enough inquiry. We have to look at that road and take a real proposal seriously. I will add one other point, which was, in addition to the solid waste issues on Nantucket, there's also been a lot of attention paid to electricity supply. So some of you may know that there are right now 2 underground cables that supply Nantucket electricity from the mainland. There was a proposal to look at a 3rd cable, and in response to that, National Grid, which serves the island, came back with what's called a non-wires initiative. So Nantucket is going to have one of the largest electric battery storage projects in New England, and there are various other initiatives in place to look at how to prevent or make it not necessary to build a 3rd cable from the mainland to Nantucket, which would be very expensive and involve environmental impacts that would require significant review. I'll put it that way. So electricity supply is something of interest on the island. There have been early looks at doing solar at the closed landfill, for example, of up to 5 megawatts. Just to put one more piece on it, the site is served by a 13.8 kV line, 3-phase at the road. Probably some system improvements would be needed to put anything more than a few megawatts in place. Right now, most of the electricity used at the site is actually used to run the fans to ventilate the facility and move the air through the biofilter, and it's a couple hundred kilowatts 24/7. The town pays that electric bill. So if there's some way to take care of that, sure, that's interesting. But yeah, so I guess maybe I've wandered to cover a little bit extra territory. I hope it's helpful. There is interest. We'd have to see the proposal, and we'll have to see where it goes when it gets here.
Thanks, George. Next questions are about leafing yard waste and organics. One of them was about contamination in the organic stream, so the compostable waste stream. In the document, it shows that it's between, of the compostable waste stream, 61 to 70% is organics based on our waste sorts. So obviously a very limited sample compared to the 11,000 tons we receive a year. We're looking at 400 bags, and each sample of 200 bags is just shy of a ton, to give you a frame of reference. And then another question, do we collect leaf and yard waste with the source separated organics? And on Nantucket, we don't. Leaf and yard waste comes in separately and is processed separately. The compost that comes out of the composter is mixed with some of the leaf and yard waste to create one of the products, but there's also a product that's made just from leaf and yard waste. Anything to add, Rob or George?
Just simply that leaf and yard waste is used to get the system back up and running when it's reinitiated, if it's down for any maintenance.
Yeah. And I'll just throw in that one way to look at how much organic material has gone into the composter over the time is to look at how much residual material has come out of the composter over time. It's an imperfect measure because sometimes compostables stick with the residuals and end up in the landfill. And sometimes non-compostables make their way through the screens into the compost. So we know that the process isn't perfect, but there is information on the content of the residuals, and then people can come to their own conclusions on what that means for what's going in. So we don't have the perfect mass balance composition in and out, but we do have some information on the front and some information on the back and some numbers, and that's the best we can do, and hopefully that'll be enough. And if you need more information, or if there's something we can get for you in the next period of time, put that in your response, and that will help us understand and maybe get some data that might help you by the time we get to the RFP level.
I will add to that and simply say the our select board has set as a number, if you've been on the website and hunted around a bit, the select board has a strategic plan that gets generally updated annually. One of those that's set in clear English there under the environmental goals is to provide data-driven suggestions and for improvements for solid waste island-wide. And as part of that, it's our mission to take a look at what we have, what we currently collect for data, and what we could collect for data moving forward. So to kind of build on George's offer there, you know, if there's information that through this entire process seems obvious to you that you would really appreciate that we haven't supplied or it hasn't come up yet in discussion, it may help us with guiding those decisions on, you know, what data it is that we actually should be collecting that we're currently not. I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
We had a question, will we be providing a copy of the PowerPoint to attendants, or will it go on the procurement page?
Yep, everything will be uploaded to the procurement page. So.
Thanks, George. The next questions are to do with the management of ABC, asphalt, brick, concrete, MU, mixed excavation waste, and clean wood. So what processes are involved? Does anything get shipped off island of those? Do you want me to take that one?
Yeah, take it.
So ABC is typically crushed and used on site and sorted where possible. MU, mixed excavation waste, is not shipped off island. It all stays on island and is sorted on island and used. Some of the, if it's more sand like material in it, it might be added to topsoil, for instance. And clean wood is wood that is unpainted and untreated. Currently, we take wood as clean wood if it has nails in it. So for instance, pallets come in as clean wood and it is turned into mulch typically. And the mulch is available as a product for sale in large quantities and for free to the community in smaller quantities that they can load themselves.
And just to add, every once in a while, that biofilter that we had pictures of has a lot of media. That's a big building. And when that media gets changed, that's, you know, wood is stockpiled and other materials stockpiled and used for that media as well. So.
Thanks. That is all the questions that I see in the chat. If I missed one, feel free to resend it or add more if you have any other questions.
I'm just looking at some of the chats and somebody used the word PFAS and the answer is yes. Are PFAS important? It comes up constantly in conversation. I mentioned early on, you know, there's a lot of concern about PFAS, how it's distributed, how it's collected. The town doesn't create PFAS, but they are certainly receiving some amounts of it in the materials that end up either at the sewer plant or at the in the waste system. The question is how much, what concentration, what impacts, how do you treat it? Do you need to treat it? What do you do with it? What will the DEP require? What's prudent? What are the health impacts? And I could add 1,000 other questions, and there aren't a lot of them that we can answer at this point. This will be a developing issue over the next year. We understand that. It's one of the other driving forces behind doing an RFEI instead of going straight to an RFP, because we want information to be developed. And if somebody has an idea for treating or collecting or destroying PFAS in conjunction with something else that the town needs to be doing as part of this system, this is the time to step forward and introduce yourselves. So again, that's a very important part of this process. And other than that, I don't know what else to say about it, that you probably haven't heard from any number of other sources about PFAS as a developing issue in this industry.
George, I did see another comment come in from Select Board Member Matt Fee regarding potential continuing mining. I know we didn't speak too much to the mining, but just to let folks know that mining of the original landfill went on here for the greater part of 10 years, which largely removed glass and sand that had been previously used as daily landfill cover, sorted that from other materials that had yet to break down or were not compostable. And so the question was, should mining the existing unlined landfill as feedstock be presented if viable? And certainly if someone is coming forward with a process that may include pyrolysis, gasification, or something that would or could use that kind of material for feedstock, certainly we could explore that. I think one of the things that hasn't really been said, but back to that gasification or pyrolysis or any kind of incineration process, it really does come down to permittability and on the local and state levels to make sure that these things that are presented are actually permittable. So I think it's an important discussion to say, you know, we certainly have a process that's, you know, I'll call it tried and true, that's working, but there are there's nothing set in stone. You know, we really wanted to walk into this process without presenting limits, just to give people a fair shake at coming in with really anything that they feel would be viable, so that we can explore that together.
Rob, if I can just add on the specific question of mining the landfill for feedstock. So the landfill mining program ended at the end of June 2019, and as part of that process, the next step was to confirm the closure design. And so the town did a basic closure. As a basic closure design, they were going to basically update it based on actual contours as of June 2019, and some questions came up. One of the questions is that throughout the mining process, there were soils removed that were recoverable in theory, and there were also residuals. The question came up, can the soils that were removed be used as contour material in the landfill? And right about then was we started seeing controversy about PFAS, and that process is somewhat stalled while the DEP decides what to do about various materials that may or may not have PFAS in them and how they should be used in the closure. So that's an open issue that the DEP is looking at on an ongoing basis. While that's happened, the landfill has not been permanently closed for those phases 1A, B, C, and 2A, which are inactive, and there's intermediate cover, but they're not closed yet. We don't know how long it will be until decisions are made and the closure proceeds. And it may in fact be the case that if we get a proposal in short term that involves mining feedstock from the landfill, that we go back to the DEP and say, hey, can we do this? This might be a better alternative to some of the closure alternatives that have already been put forward. So just in terms of expanding the possibilities that are out there, even though the landfill is closed and the closure design has been submitted, that doesn't mean that feedstock might not be mined by the right proposal under the right circumstances, given where we are in that process. And again, you know, closure design has been submitted, hasn't been acted on. There's some stalling while some of the PFAS issues get considered and adjudicated. While that's happening, if someone comes on with a new proposal, there's still an opportunity to consider it. So I just wanted to react positively to that. And again, I don't know how that fits in with other things that people might propose. Just putting it out there. We're listening.
Thanks, George. We've had another question asking for a little bit more information about what has been done with the compost and how viable that is moving forward.
Bren, you want to do that?
I could speak to that briefly and just say there's various compost products. And just to clarify for folks, there's a fair amount that does get generated through the co-compost facility. But the grand majority of the compost material that is produced is from our leaf and yard waste. The portion that is created from the co-compost facility, which includes the sludge from the wastewater treatment process, that has been segregated, and that is currently being applied to the lined landfill cells. What does that look like moving forward? Will directly be impacted by our response to PFAS.
Thanks, Rob. Any last questions from anyone?
I want to thank you all for attending today, and certainly we will continue to follow up with today's presentations, as well as the questions and answers that had been provided prior to today and today and following today up until, I don't know if there was a deadline listed, Rebecca, in the actual RFEI for questions, but I would say to be fair to everybody involved, to make sure that we get everything out, we would ask that questions be submitted up until a week prior to the deadline. And we'll be happy to supply as much detail as possible.
That's fine. And I'll send a reminder to all the plan holders just because I think you're right. I don't think that there was a deadline. So I'll just let everyone know to get their questions in by the first week of February.
Great. Thank you all again, and look forward to receiving and reviewing many packages. Have a great day, and Happy New Year to you all.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
George.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.